Kate Milfalcha. Welcome to Irish Granny Helen, and we are on our final video of Final Events by Nick Redfern. This is number 6. So, last video on the book, we're going to conclude the book about the secret government group on demonic UFOs and the afterlife. So, greatest conclusion. Okay, we're on chapter 26. They come in the emperor's new clothes. So the Collins elite, and just to refresh everybody's memory, the Collins elite is the nickname that the subgroup within the Pentagon, National Intelligence, and government agencies, this little select group, gave themselves. They're a group that were charged with investigating alien abductions and aliens, etc. And they are at odds with other individuals in the same sphere because they believe that these entities are demonic, not really from another planet, or if they're from another planet, they're still demonic. So the Collins elite did a report, and the report was the solution of how to thwart the enemy. And these are the steps that they believe that the American government needs to take to protect the American people against alien invasion, I guess. Demonic takeover. This is their opinion, by the way. I'm not buying into this, but I think it's interesting. We'll talk. So the first is intense indoctrination of faith and values at a planetary level. Okay, so what is the interpretation of this? They want Christian theocratic control globally. Rapidly alter the current population's mindset. Don't know how they plan to do that. And specifically, this is Christian that they're aiming for. So there's a guy called Joe Jordan, and he believes that he originally was one of the people who studied abductions and worked at the Kennedy Space Center. And he got involved with MUFON doing these studies. And he believes that abductees were on the front line of this demonic war, and he focused on them. And he worked with his girlfriend, who was a very devout Christian, because it made it easier to debrief female abductees because of the weird things that happened. They didn't feel comfortable talking to a man. And his girlfriend told him, something dark is going on. You need protection. And she gave him a Bible. In November of '96, he became a Christian after 2 weeks of intense Bible study. He said he had a vision that entities were bad and he needed to stop investigating them. But he reviewed a 2-hour video of an abductee. And when the guy called out, "Jesus, help me," the abduction stopped and he awoke in his bed on this video. And this was meaningful to Jordan. Jordan saw that, contrary to what he'd been told, these experiences can be stopped and we're not helpless. So he called researchers around the country. They wanted to talk to him, but they wanted to talk to him off the record. And all of them said that they'd seen similar cases where Jesus, or the name Jesus, stopped abductions. And they didn't want to mention it originally because they weren't sure what to make, and they were afraid it would destroy their credibility if people believed that they were leaning heavily into Christianity. So they were happy to let him take the public position on this. Jordan is now on a mission to expose the truth of demonic abductions, is what he calls it. He knows of 400 cases over 12 years that were stopped by intoning the name of Jesus. He describes one case, a guy who was very religious in his childhood and who stopped the abduction by invoking the name of Jesus. And Jordan says that he saw this pattern a lot, and he gave it to this recourse to do this to other abductees to help stop their experiences. So the question here now is, why do abductions happen? Why does this alien contact happen? And first, he believes that some people say they want the experience, so they invite it, like you have to invite in a vampire, right? Others are unknowingly opening the door, and either they're anti-Christian or they're anti-biblical or they're anti-God, and they go against the Bible. And this includes lapsed Christians. And I could not hold myself back here when I was reading it. I had to write my own opinion down, and this was very problematic to me, because there's nothing magical about the Bible. It's a collection of cherry-picked human writing, some of it ancient mythology from the Jewish people from very far back, and some of it 150 years after Jesus was alive, and all of it voted on through different church councils to select what they would and would not put in the Bible. They rejected just as much stuff that had just as much claim to legitimacy, but it didn't toe the patriarchal line. And what they're really saying here, without saying it, is we, these Christians, have a particular Christian prejudice and fear of what we would call metaphysics or the paranormal or New Age or occult, a longstanding prejudice against it. And we want to impose that on everybody. We're going to blame everything from our context, our point of view. I found this particular part of the book really hard to swallow. This, and I just want to really, and this is not in the book, this is my opinion. I just want to really reiterate, there's nothing magical about the Bible. If you accept that the Bible is a received word of God directly from God, then you're a biblical follower. Doesn't even make you a Christian, really, as we have seen often. But that's one worldview, and there are a lot of people in the world who don't feel that way, and I have a problem with imposing this one particular worldview on everybody. Anyway, to move forward, he also says that people have these experiences as children because the door was opened by their parents, and it starts a generational cycle. He claims that ETs often bash the Bible and Jesus and God. And why do they only bash the Christian religion? And I would argue that that's not true. I have heard conversations, allegedly, in which the aliens were equally as critical of all religions, because it wasn't the theology of any one religion. It was the institution, the organization, the human created institutions that they had problems with. He says ETs are the angels preaching a new gospel that was mentioned in the Bible. They are the fallen angels. He's against the Judeo-Christian, or they are against the Judeo-Christian God. They're not physical. They're from another state of being. And he mentions abductees who have experienced being taken, but witnesses say that they never went anywhere. I saw him there the whole time in the bed, and yet this person in the bed has had this experience of being elsewhere. They seem to be in an unconscious state. They awoke exhausted with a distorted sense of the amount of time that had passed, and he calls it an apparition created in the mind by entities. And I wouldn't even argue with that. I would say that's entirely possible, but entity is not synonymous with devil. And I think that's where I start to disagree. I'm totally putting my own opinion in here, and you'll have to forgive me, but I took the notes, so I get to. He says the purpose of it all is to deny the reality of Christianity. He can't come as they can't come. The ETs cannot come, as in all of like gnomes and fairies, because no one's going to fall for that. So the emperor has new clothes. He says they come in disguise to defeat and delude us. And if the Bible is real, people who succumb to ETs are doomed. The ET agenda is to doom human souls. It's a cosmic war to drag souls to hell. And I wrote in the margin here that this is such a basically Christian fundamentalist argument, and it doesn't really allow for an understanding of many, many, many other worldviews and larger philosophical and metaphysical ideas. This is just such a reflective of such a narrow worldview. There are plenty of fundamentalist Muslims who would say the same thing, but they would use the word Muslim or Islam instead of Christianity. This is just the lure of advanced alien technology, but it's a false lure. It becomes a hook and you end up selling your soul to the devil. Okay. I don't know. I'm not impressed with alien technology because I'm still struggling how to use my telephone. So anyway. Okay. Chapter 27, What Intelligent Evil Wants. Michael Heiser, a PhD in Hebrew, Bible, and ancient Semitic languages, agrees with the Collins elite and the Department of Defense whistleblowers and Joe Jordan. Now, these are all the people who advance this demonic idea. They all claim this is not altruistic, this visitation. It's not altruistic. It's demonic because people were taken against their will. And I do think that that's a disturbing portion of it is the interference with people's free will. People who don't want to go end up having to go anyway. So I do agree with that one element. I don't think it's demonic, but nasty things are done to them either physically or mentally. And it's a negative, sinister sort of event. They could communicate with and ease our fears, but they don't. As Jacques Vallée has said, if they are so advanced, why don't they handle this better? It's a human rights issue. I think that's an interesting perspective. It is a human rights issue. He says the ET goal is a paradigm shift, that we are from them, related to them, that they are either progenitors or benefactors. And it's not just to attack Christianity, it's to tear down belief in the supernatural, to eliminate a need for God. It goes way beyond the structure of Christianity. ETs want to place themselves in the position of authority and as creators. That they want us to worship them and not God. I don't know, that's not the message that I've heard given to people. That they're manipulating humans and using the highest authority, like of God, in order to manipulate us. That they want to eliminate dualistic worldviews of good and evil, dark and light. That they want to eliminate the need for salvation. And now that salvation is a concept we could talk about all day long. And if you don't believe you need spiritual salvation, then you're in trouble. This is their position. ETs are intelligent evil that wants the souls of humanity to be damned. He warns that they're against people like Parsons. His group, not the aliens, his group is against people like Parsons who are within the military-industrial complex, and they're devoted to the entities. Now we're in chapter 29, the man from Roswell. Someone who shares the same opinion is a person called Guy Malone, and until he was 23, he was really into New Age stuff. Then he realized that ETs are not benevolent, that they're liars. there's no real explanation for that. I have a big question mark, so I don't know what to tell you. He became a Christian and he was told that ETs were demons, which is, he feels that's an oversimplification. He thinks their true nature is spiritually related to fallen angels in the Bible. He knows this because exorcism works. He moved to Roswell to push his book to Roswell and ET tourists who go to Roswell. And his book was not well received. At the UFO Museum, they wouldn't even carry it because it dealt with religion. So he was coming from this Christian point of view. And the Christian bookstore wouldn't carry it because it dealt with ETs. So he decided, two could play this game. So he opened his own bookstore, the Alien Resistance Headquarters Bookstore. If Roswell is a place for truth, biblical perspectives should be included. I think every perspective should be included. Okay, so at first, he targeted UFO religious cults. There are some of those out there, like Heaven's Gate. Remember that one where there was a UFO hiding behind the Hale-Bopp comet and it was coming, whatever. He saw others influenced by Hollywood and Eric von Daniken and Zecharia Sitchin, both of whom their books I recommend. And he says even the church is influenced by them. He wants to increase public awareness that people need to believe that abduction is real before they start to care about what abduction is. A lot of people just don't think it has ever happened. It seems to have actually calmed down and possibly almost stopped now, that there was a period of time when it was really active and it's not happening anymore. He said the fundamental Christian worldview needs to be reconciled. The reality of aliens with the Bible, it needs to be reconciled. He says this whole question is not about life on other planets. It's about demons disguised as ETs. And they disguise themselves as ETs to denounce Jesus, to call him an advanced alien. And it's a bad thing, is what he's saying. Why do ETs focus on Christianity? And why do ETs exactly parallel Bible stories? I'm not sure why he thinks they focus on Christianity, because maybe in the United States, which is a Christian population, pretty much, at least they affiliate if they don't practice. But ETs appear all over the world and all throughout history and long before Christianity was a thing. So I find this very confusing. I don't see this argument at all. If ETs bother you and leave in Jesus's name, then they aren't biological, he says. They're lying, and they're lying spirits. And Christians don't need to prove it. He said the burden of proof is on those who say the ETs are not fallen angels. Most investigators believe there are turbulent times ahead in relationship to all of this. They call it disclosure, or the quickening, or the coming, or the arrival. And it's called the awakening by New Age people, and it's called the grand delusion by Christians. And we are all going to need to make educated decisions. And he says that when this revelation of the alien reality happens, there will be a collective state of shock. And we're going to be then at the mercy of these so-called visitors. Government and religious leaders will tell us what to believe, but they don't have a good track record for truth-telling. I agree with that. And even the most sincere humans will be duped. Most researchers report that many cases with apocalyptic visions happen, and then the people are told that have these visions are told how aliens will help. And this whole narrative that they receive, the message contradicts the Bible. Therefore, they're wrong. They're not the Bible. They are suspect. They will promise things like deliverance through cloning, reincarnation, physical removal from the planet just in the nick of time. And he says that aliens routinely promise deliverance. The Bible predicts people leaving the faith towards the end times because of seducing spirits. And even if real ETs are real, they promote the doctrine of demons. All troubles on earth. Now, this is what they believe. I'm not advocating this. I'm just simply telling you what this group of people believes. That all troubles on earth are the work of fallen angels and globalists who want a one world government under the Antichrist. That demons are creating false narratives of ET visits. And they reinterpret the Bible as an ET story. They say that the Bible is the greatest UFO story ever told, and to accept the coming aliens as our friends, benefactors, superiors, and saviors to help us fight off the bad aliens and usher humanity into a new golden age of peace and spiritual harmony with the deified universe, all the while lying about helping us escape the coming horrors of the tribulation period and the sure judgment of the return of Jesus Christ. And then it goes on to talk about literal interpretation of the book of Revelation. Disclosure, he says, is the Antichrist and one world government leading us to the lake of fire, and for the fallen angels in the final end to enslave souls. Chapter 29, when time runs out. So here they're talking about, the last judgment, the dead being resurrected, the second coming of Christ. The Roman Catholic Church says that at death, the soul goes through a particular judgment. In other words, each individual is judged at death. And then at the end of the world, the final judgment, everybody gets judged. Isn't that double jeopardy? I don't know. Anyway, at the final judgment, the soul and the body are reunited, and there's a revival of the universe and a new heaven and earth. In the book of Revelation, Christians disagree about what all of this is about, and they have a lot of fancy terms for this, and I just copied down some of it, but I find it unnecessarily parsing every thought. One is called preterism. It's a biblical prophecy that you're not judged at the end of days, but, at your death. Futurists talk about the resurrection of the dead and the rapture of the living and the violent tribulation and 7 years of the Antichrist that Christians are persecuted. Pre-tribulationists talk about the rapture that happens before the end times, people getting taken up. Kind of like Noah going into the ark. Mid-tribulationists believe the rapture will happen halfway through the tribulation. See what I mean? It's crazy. Israel will sign a 7-year-long treaty with the Antichrist, and it will trigger the final events. Parsons called himself the Antichrist. Remember, he was born on that date, too. And he planned to move to Israel, but blew himself up accidentally instead. It was when he was experimenting and something went wrong. All are part of what's called pre, post, or amillennialism. All of this believes the ultimate war of good against evil, God against Satan, and the judgment of souls. So this is all just finely parsed arguments within the larger notion of the judgment of souls. Ray Bosch, the guy that they whistle blew to, his DOD informants believe the Left Behind series. The Antichrist comes and fools us, and then Armageddon happens. Bosch didn't really believe this. He welcomed the return of Christ. He didn't believe that it was something to fear. But the Department of Defense guys, who were part of this elite group who thought they were aliens or demons, they fear the final battle scenario, and they fear how the spiritual outlook of people will be affected. Will they be led away from Christ? Dan T. Smith, an Harvard economist and UFO researcher, had something to say about that. According to Smith, UFOs are primarily a psychological, metaphysical phenomenon, which are both preparing us and pressuring us to develop our own psi abilities. That's, paranormal abilities. Not that UFOs are a single type of entity. Smith asserts that there are powers and principalities at work. Powers and principalities are the names of two kinds of angels. It's an interesting choice. Presumably supernatural entities like angels and demons. Furthermore, he said that a radical program of parapsychological research and development is currently underway near Los Alamos, New Mexico. This group's development of psychokinesis and psychotronics, which is a term used to denote psychic warfare techniques, this represents a danger of eschatological proportions related to death and the judgment of souls. Quote, these techniques have been available but controlled throughout history. Now other entities are forcing the issue. I'm not even sure what he's saying here. This is just a bit much. But what he says is he hints at eschatological emergency, like our understanding of death and the judgment of souls, because this is a national security threat. So he's looking at it from that angle. Chapter 30, Seeing is Believing. Oh, and he says this emergency is a real emergency for the CIA. So elite research programs are on hold because they think the elite group's research programs are on hold because they think they've proven that biblical prophecy is going to happen. And the end is fairly close, and that no more need exists to study the demonic agenda because it's already unrolling. And their new focus is to convince the military that the elite is right, and then how to convert the population to radical Christian fundamentalism to save souls. So now we're starting to get somewhere. And what they want to do, and I put stars all over the place in the margin. This is the real threat. And this is what this whole stuff is about. ETs as demons. This is about forcing Christianity, fundamentalist Christianity, down everybody's throat. And one way they're going to do it is by scaring everybody into thinking ETs are real, but they're not from another planet. They're demons. This is so cynical and so bizarre. It's hard to believe. But they want to convert everybody via forced indoctrination and trickery if needed. And wait till you hear what they have up their sleeves. They want the new world order based on and controlled by the beliefs and prophecies of the Old Testament and the Book of Revelation. Redfern met former member of the elite in 2009. And this is what he told Redfern. He was disgusted by the plan moving forward to study Roswell materials by the military. And he said that they will make Jesus return more quickly because he has to. What does he mean? He says there's a group inside the government who call themselves Christian, and he says they are really bullying thugs. What they believe has nothing to do with the teachings of Christ. They want to enforce strict Christian doctrine on the entire population in a dictatorial fashion. They are totally against free will. He says the Bush administration, now this was a little bit ago, 2009, but Obama was president. So he said the Bush administration saw 9/11 as the start of the countdown to the last great battle to bring revelation to pass. Now, I wrote here, these are not my words. This is not me, YouTube. I'm telling you what the book says. He says they even discussed a covert arm of the U.S. military to be created to use. Now, I don't advocate this. This is this nonsense that the small group of people is talking. To advocate a small atomic device in a U.S. city to cause the invocation of martial law. This is their delusion. And nightly curfews, no freedom of speech, closing borders, widespread surveillance, and control of the media. No comment. Then, the skies of North America will fill with huge images of Jesus. Stick with me here. There's more to this. This actually has a name. It's called Project Bluebeam. It's designed to ensure the fulfillment of biblical prophecy through staged fakery and holograms. Satellites projecting Martin Luther King, Jesus, Krishna, Mohammed, all over the planet in all different languages, depending on where you are, would merge into the Antichrist, would tell the population globally that all these scriptures were false and misunderstood, that religions of old were responsible for wars and fighting. In order to abolish religion and to create a new world religion represented by the Antichrist, hoping to create civil chaos, then they could step in and control the population and usher in a new era to pit the human race against the Christian God. This is the most paranoid, bizarre belief. But Redfern's elite source says that no one wants the Antichrist returning to the planet, that this is gossip, and that they really weren't doing what's called Project Bluebeam. There's actually something more sinister. That's the cover story, that they're afraid aliens are going to take over and the Antichrist and the New World Order. That's all baloney. The real story is Bush wanted to fake a significant religious event to influence America like a sky full of angels with God. Because to convert everyone, they wanted to impose radical, fundamentalist Christianity. And they would do it through fear if they couldn't do it any other way. And this is how they were going to instigate the fear. Start these stories that ETs are fallen angels. ETs go against the Bible. ETs are demons. This is their story, not true. But get people so afraid that they run to fundamentalist Christianity and external control for safety. So he's trying to expose a deceptive this guy speaking to Redfern, who was disgusted and who quit, said they were trying to expose deceptive entities by using another kind of deception. And his take on this was, this is not where I wanted to go. This is not Christianity. It could just as easily fulfill prophecies or open doors for the Antichrist and create the ability to take control of a new world order future. There's just too much weirdness in all of this. The elite could actually bring about a realization of the prophecies with their own deceptive plans. This is a right-wing fundamentalist Christian plan. And he's saying it really existed. And he was so disgusted at how far they'd gone down that road that he just quit in disgust, that they're intentionally trying to manipulate the story. It's a kind of a backdoor attempt to force fundamentalist Christianity on the population. They want a theocracy. And he fears an apocalyptic future is rapidly approaching. And he said, just in case you wondered, he said Bush planned a response to 9/11 at Offutt Air Force Base, where the elite was connected. We've talked about this Air Force Base. Ray Bosch discussed this before. The Rendlesham Forest incident, I've covered this book, Left at Eastgate. It happened December 26th through the 28th in 1980. There were a couple of different sightings of UFOs and interactions with UFOs over a period of a couple of days at this military site. And that's a complex. It takes place in a geographical location called the Rendlesham Forest in England. The event was located in and around the Bentwater Woodbridge shared military base. The RAF and the Air Force share this military base, so they can have lots of fancy things and they both get to use them. And Ray Bosch was the one who was given the job to get to the bottom of what really happened. And it's considered still an enigma today, cloaked in secrecy. Now, this happened in 1980. There's a great book, if you haven't read it, called Left at Eastgate. That'll give you the whole background of what happened. But then subsequently, the two main military personnel who were involved, ordinary guys on the ground who actually interacted with this appearance, have gone on to talk more about it. There are interviews. I think you can see them on YouTube. Really, really interesting stuff. In 1994, the Department of Defense guys, the whistleblowers, told Linda Moulton Howe, that Bosch's investigation of Rendlesham Forest bothered high-level people in the government because he was getting somewhere with it. And this hints that it was staged to measure the response of military individuals there. How would they react if they saw a UFO? This was what he's hinting at. He said it was a hologram that could interface with the environment, that these holograms are very advanced. So he met with a British researcher, Jerry Randles, in 1992. Jenny, sorry, didn't read my handwriting correctly. It's Jenny. It still looks like I wrote Jerry. It's Jenny Randles. So she describes what it is she thinks happened. This is a device which manipulates the subatomic basis of matter at a quantum level and builds a bridge between mind and physical substance. If I understood it correctly, this supposedly stimulated the mind into having vivid hallucinations, but at the same time created physical effects in the real world, which could take on a semblance of the appearance of the hallucinated image. In other words, what was seen was mostly in the mind, but it was not entirely without physical form and partially substantial in the same way that a hologram is real, but has no weight or solidity. The result is a terrifying apparition. Not entirely sure I understood that explanation, but okay. So Bosch was dubious about this. He said, why try to blame the event on psychotronic warfare? In other words, they're using advanced quantum physics and holograms to fool people. Why? He says, however, this sort of tool would serve to create a giant Jesus in the sky. If indeed this is true, it mirrors Jordan's assertion that demonic entities can do this with abductees, manufacture a scenario that seems, feels, and looks real. So Redfern's question is did these colleagues of the DoD that were in the Pentagon, did they manage to duplicate this kind of technology? In the 60s, the CIA wanted to do something similar over Cuba, put images of Jesus in the clouds as the U.S. invaded, like God is on our side type of thing. And this was called an operation to invade that didn't happen. This was called the Bay of Pigs and all that. It never happened. No matter, there's a huge push to increase the presence of Christianity, apocalyptic Christianity, into the military. This is what Redfern has learned. Chapter 31, Onward Christian Soldiers. In January of 2010, coded biblical messages were inscribed on high-powered rifle sights of the U.S. military. Like, they had a storehouse full of these rifle sights, and there were coded Christian messages inscribed on them. By whom? Why? These rifle sights were made by a company called Trigicon or Trigicon. They had a $650 million contract to make 800,000 sights for Marines. The company belongs to a devout Christian, and this guy got killed in a plane crash in 2003. So, there's nobody left to really ask. They were distributed despite the anti-proselytizing rule in the military. This rule is you don't want your military actions to look like some kind of biblical religious crusade. But they were full of the Book of Revelation quotes. It's mind-boggling that this happened. Michael Weinstein at the Military Religious Freedom Foundation said of what's called the Jesus rifles, it's literally pushing fundamentalist Christianity at the point of a gun against the people that we're fighting. We're emboldening an enemy. Rather disturbingly, U.S. military personnel told Weinstein that their commanders were referring to these weapons as spiritually transformed firearms of Jesus Christ. So the company was forced to stop and to send kits to all the people who had received these sights to modify them in the field. In 2003, there was an intelligence briefing on the Iraq War to the White House to cover pages with, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. There was an intelligence briefing on the Iraq War at the White House. And there was more than one of these briefings on the Iraq War at the White House. And the cover papers of these written reports that they were handing out to everybody were covered with biblical quotes from the Pentagon. Therefore, for example, this is a cover page from March 31st, 2003, taken from the Pentagon. Therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Similarly, April 10th from 2003 Pentagon report. Behold, the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him to deliver their souls from death. It was accompanied by a photograph of a statue of Saddam Hussein being pulled to the ground in Baghdad. Barry Lynn, great guy, a lawyer who has fought in front of the Supreme Court to get contraception legal for married couples, to get contraception available to unmarried people. He was instrumental in that. He went to speak to college students in the 60s and passed out free rubbers and got arrested for it. So this guy stands by his convictions. Barry Lynn. He said he was the director of Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. And he said, American soldiers are not Christian crusaders, and they ought not be depicted as such. Depicting the Iraq conflict as some sort of holy war is completely outrageous. Try telling that to the people who want us to believe the holy war is exactly what is afoot. In 2003, Lieutenant General W. Boykin this guy is in the Pentagon, in the military, big shot. Lieutenant general. He traveled around making speeches at churches in his uniform, disparaging Islam, defining the war as a fundamentalist end times scenario. There was a complaint made. He was promoted. Rumsfeld liked that he told people that the war on terror was a battle with Satan. This is what was going on. The end times version of Christianity has infected foreign policy with biblical worldview. And when this book was written, Mike Huckabee was not our ambassador to Israel. I'll just put it that way. There's improper pressure within the military command structure to make members join this religious fundamentalist Christian group. In 2007, an evangelical group called Operation Stand Up was preparing to mail freedom packages to soldiers in Iraq as part of an army program. Along with socks and snacks, the packages were set to include copies of an apocalyptic video game entitled Left Behind: Eternal Forces. Only when the details of the plan were publicized by those who saw such actions as fundamentally wrong did the Pentagon grudgingly announce that the operation would be shelved. Becoming an army of Christian soldiers, not for the Mideast, he says, but to bring it home to the streets of the United States as religious fascism. This is the ultimate goal of what they're up to here, is what he is saying. Using religious fear to control the population, to lock us down, and to isolate us from the rest of the world. Does any of this sound alarmingly familiar? And I have to say, we can't know now what's going on in the military and the Pentagon, given the cabinet. And this was written in, I don't remember, I don't have it. Yeah, 2010. This book was written in 2010. These predictions were made in 2010. That they're grooming the military to police the U.S. streets, to keep demons at bay. They're policing the streets, and they're convinced that God wants this and will save the United States from Satan. They're indoctrinating troops. It's like a biblical big brother. He predicted this in 2010, and he predicted this when he said this in 2010. He said that within about 10 years, so 2020, the U.S. military will be indistinguishable from religious warriors. They want to save the U.S. with a religious iron fist and enforce Christianity on all, to save our souls from Lucifer's minions. And so Redfern asks, is the demon story meant to distract away from the real ETs, or is the belief of the elite true? And then he says that these events may be underway. That's the end. I won't tell you the 2 words I read at the end, but I was gobsmacked when I read this last chapter, because all the way throughout the book, I just couldn't get a real strong grasp on Redfern's point of view. Was he agreeing with all this demonic stuff? He didn't seem like his other works. Or did he take exception to it? Or, where did he stand? And these people who are harboring these ideas, are these the same people that I've read in a variety of other places have dug their heels in about disclosure for the American population because they think that these are demons? They're fundamentalist Christians. Luis Elizondo said exactly this. Peter Hellier said it. Somebody else. Oh, the musician, the rock guy said it. what's the name? I can't. Tom DeLonge said it. Yeah, this is really interesting. This is the end of the book. Sorry, I should have said that's the end of the book. Interesting book to read. I would take it a step farther and read more on this, because this is a heated debate that was raging in 2010, and a lot of what the opposition to this cabal of Christians, a lot of what the opposition predicted might happen in the military has happened. Scary. So I guess if you see Jesus in the sky, you might think twice before you start asking for salvation. Thank you for watching. I'm thinking I'll probably look into this a little more deeply in my membership, and have to make some questions. And then in the meantime, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this, and have a completely different kind of book for next week. And I'm waiting for a completely different book that is just not arriving. It's driving me crazy. Slán go fóill, slánte.